Welcome back to Before Floor, an extension of Five on the Floor, your Miami Heat pregame show on the Five Reasons Sports YouTube network. It's been a crazy news day, so let's acknowledge that the Miami Dolphins have a lot of stuff going on, and I would stay glued to the YouTube channel for all of the developments as it relates to the Miami Dolphins, which is not very good. So this is going to be a much more honorable show, we'll say, than maybe some of what we've been reading. So we're going to get into this Raptors matchup, which it feels like we were just talking about this not too long ago. But before we dive into that, want to make sure to give a shout out to our sponsors. And that first is Mark Brown. So Mark Brown, PA, experienced attorney right in South Florida. He's there to help you build. If you're a young single individual, it's important you have a meeting with Mark Brown to make sure someone you trust is making decisions for you. If you're unconscious or incapacitated, you want your assets to go to the right places. If you're young with a family, you absolutely got to meet with this guy. Set up plans for your kids. If anything unfortunate ever happens, you want to have a plan in place. Even if you're older and you don't have a family, you should have a say in where your estate goes. So make sure you reach out to Mark Brown. There is a small firm right there in Miami. He allows him to stay super laser focused on what he's doing with each one of his clients. He's experienced at protecting your best interest. Give him a buzz at 954-566-5678. Mention Five Reasons. You'll get a free case evaluation. He'll take great care of you. He is certified, Ethan J. Skolnick certified. Again, a free case evaluation, 954-566-5678. That's Mark Brown, PA. You can also find him at markbrownpa.com. And the other sponsor that you guys know, we're going to run through this quickly, Biscayne Bay Brewing, the official brew of the Miami Marlins, and also the Five Reasons Sports Network. The Tropical Bay IPA is a super popular one, Marlins Lager, even the double IPA for those who want to go a little more hardcore, Miami Pale Ale for somebody who wants something a little more smooth. Ask for them by name when you're in your local pub. You know where it is, Biscayne Bay Brewing. Find one for the game tonight because it's definitely going to be a challenging one. So you need everything to shake off those nerves. Look no further than Biscayne Bay Brewing. All right, fellas, let's dive into this matchup. I feel like we were just talking about this. I have Brady Hawk with me. You can follow him at Brady Hawk 305. Ricky J. Mark. You can follow him at Ricky J. Mark, and Alejandro Villegas on the ones and twos. And we may even get another co-host hop in here. You never know how that goes. So stay tuned. Keep your eyes glued for any surprises.
He's coming. Give him a couple minutes.
That's what's up. So guys, second night of a back-to-back. That game was awful. The Spo called it an utter dumpster trash can or something like that. And it absolutely was. 30-point loss. It sounds like Jimmy's back, but I haven't heard past that. Brady, who's in and who's out?
Yeah, as you mentioned, Jimmy Butler being back obviously changes things immediately. We've talked about this Boston game for the last 24 hours. When you have Jimmy back in the equation, there's obviously always going to be different issues, but they're completely different issues that we're discussing. Like last night, as we talked about, it was just pretty ugly. The other one, PJ Tucker, Spo said that they're kind of going through his warm-ups. So they're going to make a decision from there. We'll kind of see what happens. But if PJ always goes down to the final few minutes, final hour, it always feels like he plays because it's hard to pull PJ out of that mode once he gets that late into the shot clock in pregame. So I'd probably lean towards him playing. And obviously that's going to be a similar game as what you saw last time in Toronto, similar players on both sides. It's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be similar lineups. The only difference is looking at last game, the time they played Toronto, guys like Tyler, guys like Bam, I think those are going to be the focal points in this one.
Yeah, Tyler, Bam, we want both of those guys to look a lot better. I think that there were opportunities in that Toronto game. The Heat showed resolve to get back in that one. Ricky, the thing that really bugged me about the Raptors Heat game that went into triple OT, and some of it was by virtue of how long the damn game was, but some of it was just straight up careless, non-disciplined basketball. I think the Heat finished, I'm trying to skate to the stat now, I think they finished with 23 turnovers. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it was up in that realm. How the hell are they going to reel in these turnovers against this Toronto team? Obviously, no Kyle Lowry. Jimmy being back, you would think helps with some of that, but lately it's been a little weird, just disjointed and such. How do you think that they fixed the turnover thing? Because that's been a reoccurring theme in losses, and I think that they can't escape Toronto tonight with a victory unless they clean that up.
Yeah. So when the moment, Greg, the moment you told me 23 turnovers, that immediately sounded to me like a team missing its starting point guard, and it's also relying on a player that's not supposed to be running your offense, and from there it just balloons and goes on from there. I think right now Miami needs to go back to basics in a way. They need to play ball movement, discipline, crisp cuts, uh, bringing down the turnovers by making your passes intentional, but not telegraphing them. Less Chris Silva minutes. Okay, look, I don't know what's going on with constantly bringing him back, but y'all saw it. Okay, just go back and look at that last post game. They explained it all. Shout out to Gadiel Chartagena. But look, hey, they need to play the game that they know best. Okay, this team has enough. I know we often say that a lot of times when we're trying to act like we don't need a star or a better player. The reality is this team has enough to beat this Raptors team. Unfortunately, what concerns me is that there are some of those old demons that I fear might be rearing their ugly head, at least for this immediate stretch. And look, Bam has to be aggressive, but not careless, as you mentioned. If he does that, then the defense will create the offense that will hopefully result in fast break points for Miami. Gabe Vincent needs to shoot a little bit better than he did, if I'm not mistaken, last time around. But at the end of the day, just look, if Miami plays their game the way they're supposed to, the turnover should come down and it shouldn't be as careless and as chaotic as it was. Because right now, if they don't get their act together, this moment right now could hurt them in the long run, especially with the Philadelphia 76ers surging right now. They're on a 5-game winning streak. Let's not let this first seed thing go to our heads too much. It's the first week of February.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. We actually had our extra co-host hop in here, so I want to welcome him to the program. Timmy, you jumped on in here, so you're getting the hard-hitting question. You ready for it?
Shoot.
What the hell are they going to do with Gary Trent Jr.? Because that guy, they couldn't find any answer for him in Miami. What do you think they're going to do schematically, maybe differently, maybe not differently, to try to get him under control?
And honestly, I think he's going for the record, because I don't know if you know, if he gets 30 again tonight, he's gonna break the Rosen's record. So I know he knows. So I think he's gonna come out third. I just have to be a mix again with Jimmy and Caleb. I haven't seen a player burn Spo twice within a week. So I trust that, and I trust that Jimmy's gonna probably take it a bit more personal this time, and make sure that but they have to make sure he has a difficult start. I think, like, just not as rough as the 9 on the ball, but just pay attention to him, because I don't know if they maybe weren't like giving him enough attention early on and he got hot. But I think Jimmy's gonna make sure, like, from the jump, just make it a bit tough on him.
Yeah, that's why I hope PJ plays too, because I feel like they're going to throw all kinds of options at him to make sure that he doesn't go off. But then I start to feel like, oh no, then Vanvleet is going to get going. Brady, I'll go to you here. Is he the guy? I know he hasn't been really playing well the last 5 or so, but overall, who concerns you most on this Raptors teams in terms of matchup? I mean, Gary Trent Jr., I guess he's been showing out lately. But I think, like, ahead of time, I don't think that most Heat fans would have said that's the dude who scares me the most on the Raptors. Who are you most concerned about heading into this matchup tonight?
As much as I think Gabe Vincent can do different things to slow Fred VanVleet down, it's Fred VanVleet. Like, look at that last game. He didn't shoot the ball well. And I don't think I even knew that was the field goal percentage when I looked at it, because it felt like anytime they needed a bucket, he's firing away from deep. I think the big thing for Miami, you mentioned individual matchups, and you have a PJ that you could possibly put on a Gary Trent. I think the big thing is, when you look at these last 2 games, you cannot be predictable with the zone. I felt like there's been too many times where they go zone, and Boston was prepared. They kind of picked it apart in that last game when they kind of went to it. Toronto got going with it as well. They were, in that first half, they were picking it apart. They put Scotty right in the middle. They're making the kick out to the corners. Gary Trent got going. OG got going. I think that's the kind of biggest thing for me. There was a time that I don't think they went to it the entire third quarter in that game. They started out in the fourth quarter. They went to it. Miami went on an 8-0, 10-0 run. Like, I think that's where it's got to be utilized. You kind of have to just go straight up, man, throw the zone in there, how they have been over the recent years. But a big thing is they kind of had to go zone in that last Boston game because being without the guys they were, there was just no way they could have went straight up. Tonight with guys back, I think the biggest thing is slow Vanvleet down as much as possible. Blitz him a little bit because, as we know, they love doing that against top-tier guards. He is a top-tier guard in this league right now, so I think that'll be interesting. And Bam Adebayo being the one to do it, being the blitzer instead of an Omer Yurtseven during that stretch when they were playing elite guards, it's obviously going to be a big difference.
So we got a comment that came in here, and I want to, go ahead and give that it's fair due. Jason says everyone in the NBA has offensive flashes. Hell, Dre had a 30-point triple-double in the finals game 7. No one says he has no ceiling, expects him to average over 20 points per game, except Bam for who he is, showing us who he is. I don't know if I 100% believe that. There's this narrative going around that Bam Adebayo's ceiling has been reached on offense, and
he's still pretty young.
I mean, is he 24 years old? Like, listen, y'all. I mean, is he not 24 years old? Correct me if I'm wrong.
He is.
I think he's around that, if not exactly that. Yeah.
Well, yo, I'm 39. I'll be 40 in February 20th. When I was 24, I had a lot more growing to do. So, like, I think if we all take us to that headspace, like to project that he is capped out in any way it's just ridiculous to even discuss. I think that his offensive game hasn't been a focal point of this team's, like, they're just not focused on getting Bam going. It hasn't been the game script per se so far. So I think that we're making too much of that overall. I'm not going to even go around the panel on bashing Bam. But I will say that, like, we'll get to a point where we will have conversations about his offense and about his aggressiveness and how it stacks up. But remember, like, when they're watching film, they're watching the defensive end just as much as they're watching the offensive end. And he's making plays like your favorite 40-point scorer on defense regularly. Anyway, Alejandro looks like he's telling me to speed it up. So here's where I want to go next. And I guess, Ricky, I'll go to you here. This would have been a game where Kyle would have had the opportunity to be back in Toronto. He's obviously out for personal reasons. There's no fans in the stands. I feel like it would have been anticlimactic for reasons had he even been there. You know what I mean? For him to not be able to reach out to the fan base one-on-one. So I'm going to stick to the schematics and go less narrative. Toronto, they only had 8 turnovers. They beat Atlanta on Monday, 106-100. They are 7 times this season, they've committed 8 or fewer turnovers. That's tied for the most such games with the Spurs and the Sixers. So, like, this team takes care of the ball. So as much as I'm talking about Miami needs to take care of the ball, what defensive stuff do you see Spo mixing in? And Timmy, I would love to hear your perspective here also. What can they mix in to disrupt what Toronto's been doing? Because Toronto got out to that lead. I think that they can't do that again. What are you guys looking for on the defensive end, just knowing that you have PJ and Jimmy back, hopefully both of them?
So before I do that real quick, I'll just very briefly go back to something you mentioned regarding the big guy that we have in the middle. I think it's not so much giving up, but understanding the personality of the player. Some players will never magically become Kobe on offense. I think that's something we need to accept. But at the same time, there's also, unless he magically does what Goku did when he was a baby and goes from being super aggressive to a level-headed, happy guy, that's how he is, and that personality translates to how he is on offense. So the skills are there. It's a matter of, okay, go demonstrate it. Go show it. Be assertive. Now, moving on to the way Miami can deal with Toronto. Toronto, they're an interesting case to me because you mentioned how responsible they've been turnover-wise this season, 7 different times where they've had, I think you said 8 or less, right? Mm-hmm. It was 8 or less turnovers. That's interesting to me, especially considering how relatively young a team they are. They're a young team filled with athletes And well, Fred VanVleet was a guy that was he even in the league, or I think it was in the G League not too long ago before everything blew
Undrafted.
up for him.
Yeah.
Undrafted. Okay, excuse
And
me. Yes,
G League. No,
undrafted.
you're right. It's G League as well.
He was G League too? Okay.
Yeah, so when he gets named on Thursday as an All-Star, he'll be the first since Ben Wallace.
Encyclopedia right there.
Well, there you go. There you go. Real recognize real. I see you, Timmy. But yeah, like I think it's interesting to see how that works, because when you're dealing with a team that is as long and athletic and somehow disciplined, you're gonna have to bait them into foul trouble. When you're dealing with, I know back in the day when I was playing guys that were significantly more athletic than me for whatever, play that old man game on them. And that's what Miami has. You have to employ that advantage. What they don't have in experience and what they have in athleticism, Miami has on the reverse. So bait them into foul trouble. You got to get them frustrated with the refs, because remember, these guys are young and athletic, and usually if you're able to take them out of the game by playing a more cerebral game, one which a coach as intelligent as Eric Spoelstra has been known to play and has been known to game plan for, this Heat team should be able to handle them. But it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy by any stretch of the imagination. I don't want any Heat fans out here talking about, oh yeah, man, we going to wreck. No. Show this Raptors team some respect. They're not to be messed with. Go out there and earn it tonight.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And I think that it'll be interesting to see what adjustments they do make, since it was so close. The games are so close together. You know what I mean? Brady, I'll go to you here. Where did I want to go next? Bear with me. I completely lost it. Oh no, the show sheet is killing me.
So while you're looking, I just want to piggyback a bit of Ricky. I think we have to live in the paint. Like, we know that the Raptors are the smallest team in the NBA. Their tallest player, I think, is Precious, or maybe they're taught. So they are the tiniest team in the NBA. So we always like to say that we play small, but we are a big team. You have PJ, you have Jimmy, who guys who play above their height. So take advantage of their, like, we know they're long, but they're short. Boucher is long. Birch is out. Precious. We had Precious, so we have a Precious at home. But take advantage of their weakness. So let Baum I like that Baum when he first came back, and I think he played a good game, like bouncing out the mid range and get to the rim. Jimmy, if his injuries allow, if his ankle allow, live in the paint. We know Caleb lives in the paint, so. And we do miss Lowry, but I like a lot with what Gabe did early in the Celtics game before I cut it off. But like the mid range, so yeah, I couldn't take the hard break. But I just don't want to see a 3-4. Like, this is the smallest team in the league. Baum, you are a big guy, and yes, like Ricky says, his personality might not be I'm going to kill you like Giannis every possession, but recognize that you have I always go back to game 5. We beat the Celtics when with Dice. Mm-hmm. I always go back to that. Like, it was 5 minutes straight. You cannot stop me. I would love if Baum realizes that he is the biggest center in this game. So that's what I'd like to see. Even if it's just on him, either he goes to the rim or sets up his guys to get to the rim.
It's true, because there isn't any guys that you necessarily look at and you're like, okay, they're so physically imposing that Bam's not going to be able to do that. So you're right. Athletically, he has the advantage. It's just about going. I found what I wanted to go to, and I'll go to Brady here. Max Strus was unconscious against Boston. It was the only highlight I think we really had. Maybe Caleb snuck one in there, but it was it was the Max Strus show in a bad loss. Duncan, though, last 2 has been ugly. And I like this little stretch here before the trade deadline for Duncan to start getting in the 19 to 20 minute range, Strus to start picking up. What do you think Duncan needs to do? What adjustments need to be made? Or is this like, we're going to go back to the cliche make or miss thing? Or what can we expect different from Duncan tonight against Toronto?
I do want to say the big thing with Max Strus is the last time he played Toronto, I mentioned I felt like that was going to be a decent game for him because this is a matchup that favors him. His base thing that he does is slipping screens. Best way to beat a Toronto team that switches everything is to constantly slip. So you're going to see some good looks from Max if he's hitting it and he's comfortable the way he was last night. I think you see a good game from him. But the way to utilize Duncan, I think the big thing is I'm talking about the matchup with Toronto. Handoffs are just not going to be easy for Duncan Robinson tonight. I think it was easy against Boston because they're dropping 2 bigs back there. He was just missing open shots. Tonight, it's not going to be like that. He's going to have to earn his open looks because this is a team that just absolutely blankets you off screens. And I think the big element here is something I talked about is the drive and kick element. Last game, they did not have the driver that they needed. Tyler Hero was their primary driver. Tonight, that'll be Jimmy Butler. Tyler can go right back into his role. And the big thing there is late in that Toronto game, even all of that Toronto game, Miami got their best looks out of driving kicks. They're a movement offense, but the way they get into that movement offense is by Jimmy penetration, dropping down that weak side corner guy. So the way to utilize Duncan, make him that weak side corner guy, especially if PJ doesn't play this one. He's going to be that weak side corner guy. But even if PJ does play, which I expect him to, I think you're going to see if Duncan gets going, it's going to be a bunch of corner looks because I think that's the way they're going to revolve it around the offense. And I don't think that's the worst thing for him trying to get going.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. And I hope that PJ does play because I think that they can sprinkle that in with Duncan regardless of whether he's out there or not. Before we close out, I want to get everyone's picks and final thoughts. Do want to mention the official fantasy partner of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and that's Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com, download the app. It is my favorite daily fantasy app. Definitely check it out because you can do multiple sports and do all kinds of different mixes of different statistics with NBA, NFL. My prize pick of the night, Fred VanVleet's at 7 assists. Go over. He's done that 5 out of his last 5 games, and there's no reason why he's not going to do it again. Whether he shoots well or not, he's going to get his assists. So I would take him over on his assists, even though 7 is a high number. Use the code 5 at prizepicks.com or on the app. That will double your initial deposit. That's FIVE5. All right, y'all. Let's start with Alejandro. Actually, he's going to lead the way here, be the first out of the tunnel with his prediction for tonight's game and who he thinks the player of the game will be. And it can be a Raptor. You don't have to choose the Heat.
Yeah, I'm not going with the Heat tonight, especially after what we saw last night. And the second night of a back-to-back, we saw what happened here in the same situation against the Raptors. So I'm going with Vanvleet then, with the best player of the night, sadly.
Hey, that's a realistic pick. It's like realistic Ricky and realistic Alejandro. Ricky, we'll go to you next for more realistic action.
Yeah, I like Scotty Barnes. He's had an interesting season, and I think he's firmly inserted himself into the Rookie of the Year conversation. I don't think he'll get it, but he'll be there in the end. I think he'll have a reason to feel some type of way if he doesn't get it. That said, I think the Heat are probably going to lose this one too. This is just one of those annoying, tough, weirdo stretches where it just doesn't look good. I'm not sure what to expect out of Bam right now. This just seems like one of those phases for him where I can't really predict the big Bam game, whether it's the point Bam or the do everything else Bam that you're supposed to. So at this point, I think the Heat. I don't think the Heat win tonight in Toronto, but I mean, we'll see. I'd love to be wrong. I'd love to be wrong.
Jay Balla, shout out in the comments. I got you in a minute, bro. Brady, next player of the game, and what do you think's happening here tonight?
Yeah, the way I see Miami winning, the only way I see Miami winning is Tyler Hero. I think that's just the biggest thing. It's something we always talk about every one of these games. If they play at Cleveland, if they play at Toronto, if they play one of these Link B teams, it's just the continued thing is it's the one matchup that really bothers them. Last night was just kind of an off night that he couldn't really get going once again, and it was a favorable defensive matchup. This one's not. This is one that he's going to have to work because, as we saw in those all bench lineups from Miami, they're going to stick Scotty Barnes on Tyler Hero. They're going to deny him, and they're going to make everybody else work in those very awkward non-shot creator lineups. I think if Tyler can get by that and not be a corner guy that's just kind of sitting around and can initiate offense and go get the ball and try to work through that, then I think Miami's in a good spot. But ultimately, I don't know if that happens in this one. I think this is another close game. Definitely doesn't go 3 overtimes, but I think Toronto gets it in the end.
Wow, this is almost unanimous. Now, listen, Toronto's only a 1.5 point favorite. I feel like if you pulse check people, if they just watch this little segment here, they'd be thinking that like we're like 9-point underdogs or something like that. Timmy, where are you at with tonight's game?
I think we actually win a close one, but I think it's a Jimmy game.
Guts.
Yeah, but I think it's going to be a very like annoying back and forth game, and Jimmy actually it won't be a game winning situation because I can't think of one of those mistakes. But I think we win a close one with defense. I think it's going to be a defensive effort that wins the game in the fourth.
Yeah, I'm with Brady on the recipe. I expect Tyler to play really well. And I think the Heat get a victory. Y'all know where I'm going with that. And for Bam Adebayo, everybody's going to say, oh, I want to see 30 out of him tonight. With Jimmy back, that's not how that's going to roll. So let's see how his defensive mindset is towards Siakam and the adjustments that he can make there, and all the other guys that he gets switched on. So I'm interested to watch that. And I'm taking the Heat. Come on, y'all. Like this team has Road Warrior vibes from 96, 97 as I date myself. So we're going to keep this going and stay up in this one seed conversation. Thank you for
Zoe was
joining
aggressive.
us. What's up?
He said
Zoe was more aggressive.
That's true. He never found a hook shot he didn't like. Thank you for joining us. Alejandro probably have continued content here. Is it the Spos press conference, etc.? Okay, so stick around to the channel. You'll get all of that content. He'll probably interrupt me any moment now and clarify, but want to just shout out our sponsors one more time.
All right, go ahead.
Mark Brown PA, go to markbrownpa.com. Biscayne Bay Brewing, ask for it by name at your local spots. Prize picks, use the code 5 to double your initial deposit. There will be 5 on the floor, hosted by myself with Alex and Brady. Post Up 5Rs going to be live. Paces and Spaces at halftime, or Spaces and Paces, or however we're saying that these days. So check out all that stuff.
Spaces.
Stay connected to the channel. And let's go Heat. Alejandro, you take it from here.
Want to advertise your business in a cost-effective way? It's time to give podcast advertising a try. Research shows
Celtics. So this is what we're going to do right now. Listen to this podcast for a little bit.
Every single game. Also, post up 5R as soon as the Heat game ends. And check out 5reasonsports.com for the latest takeaways from Brady Hawk and others on all the South Florida teams, including the Heat. And check out the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks so much to Quarterdeck for hosting us in Davie tonight. Had a great time with some 5 Reasons contributors and others from the community who listen to the podcast. So we, of course, appreciate that. Quarterdeck with many locations in South Florida, in Broward County, from Davie all the way to Dania. And, of course, they've got great sushi, great wings, great buffalo shrimp, great drinks, the whole deal. Check out Quarterdeck. And if you're in Miami, check out our other sponsor, City Cigar Lounge. That's going to be one of our new spots down there in Dade. They have a great little food menu there, but the big deal there is they've got more than 50 different types of premium cigars, more than 350 different types of liquor, and it's a quiet, cool, comfortable environment right down the street from FTX Arena. So check out Quarterdeck if you're in Broward, and check out City Cigar Lounge if you're in Dade. And now, tonight's episode.
Down to Biscayne. Yeah. 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing, got it all band. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
Welcome back to 5 on the Floor. I am your host, Greg Sylvander. Tonight's floor plan, with me, we have a different cast of characters. So the group you saw on the floor for the Miami Heat tonight was not necessarily all the guys you recognize. And maybe tonight's episode will not feature all guys that you recognize, but you'll recognize them from other places. One you will recognize because he's on here relatively most of the time, and that's Brady Hawk. You can follow him at Brady Hawk 305. His takeaways for the Miami Heat Boston Celtics game are already up on 5reasonsports.com. I don't know if I mentioned I'm your host, Greg Sylvander, but duh. And then with us for his maiden voyage on 5 on the Floor, I believe it's your maiden voyage, Tony Schwartz, the host of In the Lane, which is on 5 Reasons Sports Network, self-proclaimed conversation coordinator, also a host of our very highly successful Pace and Spaces, which is our halftime show, Miami Heat halftime show. You can find on Twitter at halftime. Tony Schwartz NBA is where you can find him on Twitter. Welcome for joining us, welcome to the pod, and thank you for joining us for this Celtics Heat breakdown.
Yeah, of course. Thank you guys for having me, although it does feel like a setup.
right? It's anticlimactic to come on after a game like tonight. So we're going to get into this game. We're going to keep it really micro, just about tonight. We're not going to look ahead. I just kind of want to get into a few things that we saw, what we thought about it, and go from there. But some of the ground rules. One, we ain't going to take a hell of a lot from this game because no Lowry, no Jimmy, no PJ. I mean, what are we really talking about here? I mean, like, are we going to do the thing where we say, well, Bam Adebayo should have scored 50 tonight. This is a night where he goes for 50. Like, if that's the show that you tuned in for tonight, go ahead and hit skip and go on to the next podcast, because we are not doing that. I think there are some other things we can talk about that are relevant. But this group just was undermanned, and the primary engines of what makes all this work were just out. So for me, I'm not taking a ton from this game. I think Max Strus deserves a major shout out. We'll get into him in a bit. There were a few other things that I think are worth monitoring, and I'm sure Brady and Tony will have their perspectives there. But all in all, the Heat turned it over too much. 18, that's indicative of a loss. Now they have to go to Toronto, so this is going to be a quick turnaround for them. We don't know the status of Jimmy or PJ, so I would expect to be the same cast up there in Toronto. Tony, since you are joining us for the first time, I guess I'll start with you here. What were your main takeaways? And that's kind of a cliche question that you would hear on the Four Letter Network. It's more about if there was any particular player that jumped out at you, negative or positive, or just anything that you took away from this game that maybe you're looking ahead to Toronto and just keeping tabs on.
Another game where I just feel like we missed the initiation that Lowry gives us. Another game where I feel the loss of Markieff Morris, when you don't have PJ Tucker or Dedmon, having another guy with size and the ability to affect the game on the boards, the way the Heat want to play their style of offense and defense, get rebounds, limit turnovers. It's painful when you play a team like Boston or the Raptors, for instance, with a bunch of length. It gets really hard to find the opportunities to play a style of winning basketball. We talked about this at halftime, but you need to be able to hit shots and create extra possessions. And that's tough when the biggest guy on the floor is Bam, and it's a whole step below everybody else.
Yeah, no, that's really true. And Bam did have his moments where he looked a little weird. I mean, let's not sugarcoat that. But there was a lot more, just the way that they opened the game offensively was not fun. Brady, you touched on that in your takeaways that you can find on 5reasonsports.com. One of the things that I thought was pretty evident early on is that Duncan was not going to get going. And I thought for some reason that this would be a game where that would happen, and it just didn't manifest the way that maybe we expected. Brady, what did they do to Duncan specifically that made it so hard for him? I know that Max found his rhythm later on, but it really seemed like Duncan, listen to me, Duncan got stifled 2 games in a row now. And I don't know, like, this is the moment in the year, 10 days from the trade deadline, when Duncan can't be having stinkers. So I'm just interested, as somebody, you have been one of the more level-headed folks in terms of seeing it through with Duncan, just kind of what your perspective was on his performance tonight.
Yeah, I think he got good looks. They just weren't going in. Like, the Heat's overall shooting appeared bad, but I think the late Max Strus surge kind of leveled off the percentage-wise. You look at a box score, but they didn't shoot the greatest from deep, obviously. Duncan was one of the reasoning. It just wasn't going in. Part of that is, we talked about pregame, what was the starting lineup going to be? And I kept saying, I feel like Tyler should start over Strus just for creation reasons. Like, that starting lineup did not have enough creation, in my opinion. And 2 quick fouls from Duncan led to them having to make that switch anyway, but it was not looking good. 14-point first quarter kind of tells you that anyway. That is just not the way to go about it. And when you're talking about Duncan Robinson, the best way to go about him, we talk about finding Bam back into the starting lineup and different elements. He needs creation around him. Like, that's the one part of Duncan's game that kind of needs him to get going. Tonight, I think he got good looks. Like, it's not just because he didn't have guys around him. But I think that was the reason. I think overall from the game, playmaking is kind of what stands out to me most. Tony kind of hit on the Kyle Lowry element, but it just looks like when they have to play this perimeter game, And I'm not just talking about shooting from the perimeter. I'm talking about playmaking from the perimeter. When they've missed guys and PJ steps into the mid post and they run everything through him. We saw a game against the Suns where they said, Omer can run it. But other than Bam, they did not have anybody. And Bam obviously got in some foul trouble as well. It just looks kind of ugly. And I think the reasoning is we could talk about Gabe Vincent being the point guard in this one. He's definitely not a true point guard, but the one thing he can do is he can get you into your offensive triggers. But the issue tonight is they didn't have any offensive triggers. Like, it was Gabe Vincent saying, you have to play make from the perimeter. You kind of have to run everything. And you just got to hope from there that you hit shots. And there was too many stretches, I think, that they missed shots. But I think that was kind of the big thing that stuck out to me is just they didn't have enough. Like, we constantly say they have enough, but tonight it just looked offensively. We can get into the matchup overall, but it just felt like looking on the floor with the way that they do things, the way that they run things offensively, they just did not have the personnel for it.
Yeah, I mean, when Chris Silva is logging 18 minutes and getting 9 rebounds and you're kind of you're depending on him, which I thought was an interesting plug by Spoelstra that I didn't expect. That just and Kyle Guy 18 minutes. I mean, he has looked not great. Like, let's just say that out loud. Obviously, those two guys, when they're playing as your 7th and 8th man, essentially, you are down to the bare bones. I thought Caleb Martin looked good. I mean, his box plus minus wouldn't tell you that he did, but it was good to see him start to get his rhythm back a little bit. Tony, I guess I'll go to you here. More about the Celtics. Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, both of them kind of got it going. Jay Rich, shout out to him because he played pretty well off the bench. I thought that Al Horford was better than advertised. Marcus Smart was pesky. What is it about these Toronto and Boston teams? Cleveland, I think, maybe presents challenges in a different way, but what is it about those two in particular that you're seeing now? Because we're getting to see them up close recently, and then obviously tomorrow we'll see Toronto again, that you think is it hampering Miami from a roster construction perspective, or is this just because of the in and out guys and things like that you don't have your full cast of characters, so why are we even measuring it?
Yeah, I would be careful how much weight you give this, okay? Because again, we're looking at a personnel that really isn't built to attack this long switching front, right? Like we talked about in pregame with the Raptors, the way you do this is by timely slips, shooters, screening for shooters. You can create advantages against the switch. But when you need a team like this has to win the game shooting the ball. And when you have to play zone, like we routinely have to play zone when Jimmy and PJ are out, and we're missing Markieff, by the way, which really sucked tonight on the boards, you can't rebound the ball. And when we can't create opportunities in transition because they are long, and that dribble that Tyler Hero has developed and Gabe's speed, when we can't really maximize that because dudes are just too long and we can't get around them, they have good lateral quickness like Boston, Cleveland, the Celtics, then you have to shoot the ball. And if you're going to shoot the ball and win, you have to create as many extra possessions as humanly possible. And we can't do that when Bam is the only effective rebounder on the floor.
That's a really good point. And I mean, Boston got less field goal attempts up, but they were more efficient, obviously 52%, 38% from three. That's a recipe for disaster for Miami. When they're shooting, when you got a team shooting above league average, that's not good. They were out rebounded by 6. So, all of that is in line kind of with where you're going here. I'll switch gears and go to Brady to try to solve a problem. And then we're going to go to break and kind of look ahead a little bit to Toronto. Tyler Hero, last 2 games, 10 made field goals. If I'm doing this math correctly, he's 10 of 40 in the last 2 games. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I thought he was 5 of 22 and 5 of 18. Does that equal 10 of 40? I don't know. That's not good. This is something that gnaws at me as a Heat fan. When I see games where Bam and Tyler play and they are the primary guys out there, that just sometimes it looks like if they had to go up against like those cyborg teams, like a Kawhi Leonard like team that sometimes the limitations get in the way. And with Hero, sometimes he just gets hot and it doesn't matter, but it's hard to really rely on that. And I know that Bam is kind of, I think that there's some physical stuff going on along there as well. But Brady, let's hone in on Hero a little bit here, because I think that like while Jimmy is out, they're going to need Tyler to do as much as ever. What's going on with him lately? The way that he's shooting, have you seen anything different? Is just missing shots? I would like to pick your brain on Tyler Hero specifically.
Yeah, I think part of it is just missing shots. But you mentioned a word when you were talking there, and it's limitations. I think there are limitations there when you talk about these specific matchups. I think Toronto especially, and it's not just because he shot poorly in that one. It's just in general that Cleveland, Toronto, Boston are three of those teams that he's kind of struggled with because they have that ability to put these lengthier guys on him and they can just bother him. It's just not as simple as finding his spots and getting there. It's basically the defense is going to force you into these different spots and you kind of have to take advantage. You saw it there for, well, I don't know if it was the beginning of the second quarter, I think it was, where he went on the stretch where he kind of got them going. They went on that 8-0 run, 10-0 run when Chris Silva and Bam Adebayo were the front court. Like there were moments there, but it just consistently wasn't there. I think just shots weren't falling. And I think you look in general and it's just limitations at this point, because you look at Max Strus with 27, you look at Caleb Martin who had moments. There are games that they are the complementary pieces. You're kind of asking these guys to step up and be the main pieces, but we can look at it that three starters are down. These are just complementary pieces looking for that main guy to step up. I think we were kind of looking at Bam and Tyler to be that, but looking tonight, he just wasn't. And you can't really win a game like that when Max Strus had 19 shot attempts, Tyler Hero had 18 shot attempts. They just didn't really have that main punch when you have a Max Strus going off as a complementary piece. And just like in general, as I said before, I just feel like those three teams, maybe possibly one of those will be a first round matchup. It might end up being dependent more on the Jimmy Butlers and the Kyle Lowrys as you'd expect. And Tyler Hero is going to have to be that complementary piece. So I think it's just a revolving door that I think Hero can be that main guy at times. But when you're relying on it at this stage, it's just a lot tougher especially when you don't have three starters.
Yeah. And also in this particular game, he doesn't get to just focus on scoring because, there's not that many other talented guys around him. So he's having to really deviate his attention in certain ways. We'll touch on that and unpack a few more details from this game and then look ahead to tomorrow night against Toronto. But before we do, I want to tell you about a couple of the great sponsors of 5 Reasons Sports Network. And the first sponsors all of my appearances here on 5 on the Floor. And they are Water Cleanup of Florida. So when a disaster strikes in your home or business, whether it's water or mold related property damage, you need specialized, fast and reliable service. Water Cleanup of Florida, they understand the impact and stress of this unexpected disaster and the way that it may cause havoc in your life. Their objective is to make the cleanup process painless and hassle-free. They're located in Delray Beach, but they can help you almost anywhere there in South Florida. Their clients are homeowners and businesses all around South Florida, so they deal with a lot of local folks. They are top notch in terms of service and all of the related activities with water damage, fire damage, any rebuild. They can do property damage assessments, cleaning and sanitizing, drying and dehumidification, rebuild, remodel. Reach out to Michael and his team at 561-408-7835. That's 561-408-7835. Mention 5 Reasons. They will take great care of you. They have 24-hour emergency service. That's Water Cleanup of Florida. You can find them at watercleanupflorida.com. If you got the schmutz, they got the guts. Another of our great sponsors is Prize Picks. So this is my favorite daily fantasy app on the interwebs. And it's really easy. Truthfully, you pick your favorite stars, select between 2 and 5 of your favorite players, regardless of sport. You can mix and match. Then you choose their over and under. You look at their different stats that Prize Picks offers. You pick the overs, you pick the unders, and then you essentially just watch the games and you can see if your guys, go over or under their stat projections. If you pick correctly, the more you pick correct and stack them together, you win. So they're getting absolutely rave reviews everywhere. You can download the app wherever you normally find apps. They have the really, really popular Power Play, which you can win up to 10 times your money. And right now, if you use the promo code 5, that's FIVE, you'll double your initial deposit up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com, download the app PrizePicks, use the code 5, FIVE, to double your initial deposit. All right, fellas. So we're not going to wax poetic on this Celtics Heat game too much longer, but did want to give you guys parting shots on that game. We talked about Hero. We talked about Max Strus, a little bit of Caleb. Tony, I'll go back to you here. Anything, parting shots in the Celtics Heat game before we look ahead to Toronto?
I mean, the most positive twist is that with a different type of personnel, I think that this game ends up completely in a completely different realm. If Lowry's able to use his downhill ability to create leverage to generate some more rim pressure, all of a sudden those Duncan Robinson shots might look cleaner or coming from a corner. If PJ is there to affect the boards and out rebound some of these guys, maybe Robert Williams isn't making Kyle Guy look like the most non-factor in the league right now. So these are things I just temper expectations. Like, this is a crappy loss because it's the Celtics and it was a lot of points, but we were outgunned. This is just how this happens. When you can't rebound the ball, that's what happens. You can't play in transition. That's what happens. You need to generate possession somewhere. We didn't have the ability to do it tonight. But guys will come back. We have Bam back. We have defensive versatility. We have ways to attack teams, and we're just missing a lot of pieces right now.
And man, Depot would have helped tonight.
He would have helped. He really would.
Brady, any parting shots on Boston, or are you finished with this game?
No, I'd like to say one quick thing in terms of Caleb, because I feel like that needs to be mentioned a little bit more. But I do want to say Spoelstra after this game said, we played about 7 good minutes of basketball, and the rest of it, I just like to put it in a dumpster truck. The rest of it was just unwatchable. A part of that 7 minutes was Caleb Martin. And I just want to say that I think there's some things there that could be unpacked a little bit more offensively. He's a guy that's kind of plugged in so many different roles. He's plugged the PJ role. He's plugged the Jimmy Butler role, and he's gone around so many different ways. But for one, there's no better outlet pass on this Heat team than to get the ball to Caleb Martin. When you get that guy in space, not only is he athletic, but he makes the right decision most of the time. And he just makes not only highlight plays, but he can just really do things in space that I think needs to be unlocked a little bit more in games like this. We saw it for that stretch. Obviously, a lot of that has to do with defensive rebounding and kind of finding mismatches in that way in transition. But even the one play where he drove and had the big dunk over Robert Williams, I just feel like there's times where I'm not totally sold if his handle is all the way there. But instead of totally always being the corner guy like the PJ or the dunker spot guy like Jimmy, I'm wondering if there's some things opening up there as a potential driver, because I feel like that is something that needs to be monitored, because we see it time and time again, these little bursts. It's just about consistency. So I'm interested there. And while I talk about driving and just the last tie up this game, the game plan, Cooper Moorhead mentioned something about them not helping off the weak side corner in this game. Boston really not helping off. And that's Miami's game plan. If you look at last game, something I kept talking about was the Jimmy driving kicks were open. You just weren't kind of getting to it. They're just wide open. That's when they're at their best. The issue wasn't that threes weren't falling and they didn't have that kick option. The issue is that they didn't have the driver. You don't have the Jimmy. You don't have the Kyle. You don't obviously have the Victor Oladipo. That's the element that I'm kind of looking at. We can tie over the Tyler Hero thing. He was not that type of driver tonight, that even though we've seen it at times being a complementary piece, that he can be that secondary driver. But when you look around this roster tonight, they didn't have that primary driver. That's what blends into poor shooting. That's what blends into worse looks. So I think that's kind of the big thing to look at in this game, when you kind of just show that things will look differently when they have a healthy roster.
I'm glad you brought that up, because Tyler, to be the primary guy to put rim pressure on the Boston Celtics, that's not going to work out. And I know that maybe Bam probably is looked at to do that, but functionally, the way that Jimmy does it and the way that Kyle does it, it's just not the way that Bam would do it anyway. So it's kind of a weird connection to make. I know Heat fans want to see Bam more aggressive, but this really was just about not having enough horses. So you mentioned Caleb, and you mentioned how good he looked in stretches tonight. And we've seen that the bounce. I don't think any of us thought that bounce was there before he got here. And it's been really fun to watch. And I'm glad you brought him up because it actually segues into tomorrow night's game really well. Because if Jimmy and PJ aren't back, Caleb got his hands full against a team that probably has more length, more athleticism, a better defensive IQ. I would have to say that. And I'm going to just go out on a limb and say they're better coached as well. They are coming off of a back-to-back. Just to update our listeners for scores around the league, the Raptors beat Atlanta 106-100 tonight. So they will be playing on the second night of a back-to-back, just like Miami. I don't know that they are as short-handed as Miami. We've got no indication that Jimmy or PJ will play. I would not expect them to play. I'd imagine they'd leave those guys out an additional game, but they traveled. So who knows? I could be totally wrong. So let's stick here with Caleb, Tony, as we look ahead to this Raptors matchup. We just saw this team, so Heat fans are going to get bored if we dig too deep on a Raptors Heat matchup, but considering that there'll be, let's just operate as if no Jimmy, no PJ. What are you looking for as we look ahead to tomorrow night against Toronto?
When we played them initially, I thought one of the biggest flashes was Jimmy being able to use his strength against their bigger guys. Jimmy could still barrel in and use those big, broad shoulders to create opportunities at the rim. I think that there's a chance that we can play them big and create opportunities on the inside. But we're looking at the same kind of struggles. Caleb, speaking of, by the way, one more thing to add to Brady's excellent recap there of his game is Caleb, he's so timely with his cuts and he's really good with his slips too. And he creates advantages doing that. And while Nick Nurse is absolutely a better coach, what I do think is that the Celtics look prepared to play a zone tonight. We flash zone at them on the first possession. They got that ball right to the nail to Marcus Smart. And I don't know if the Raptors will be as prepared to play our chaos zone where we're just kind of throwing bodies at you all night. We had opportunities to win that game the other night when Jimmy went superhero. But I think we can create advantages against the Toronto Raptors. We might not need that kind of superhero play in order to get a victory, but it's still an uphill battle, man. And this is a big battle against the Raptors tomorrow.
Yeah, I expect them to lean in. So let's say PJ and Jimmy don't play. I expect them to lean into the 3-point shooting the way that they did for that extended stretch where they didn't have Kyle and Jimmy, et cetera, and they just had to make things do. So I expect more of that, and they'll be more comfortable doing it tomorrow night, probably. One thing that I'm a little worried about is Fred VanVleet didn't shoot so great in that Miami game. I'm looking this up really quickly. He was 7 of 22. It didn't feel like that when he was draining them late ones, but now he gets a matchup with Gabe again, which I think is a great matchup. And Gabe Vincent, man, that dude is a gamer. He is not afraid of anybody. I'll say this, no matter whether they lose or whatever, I'm impressed by Gabe night over night. Brady, looking ahead to tomorrow night, that's one of the matchups I'm looking forward to most. Maybe I'm being a little too 1-for-1 because of the way the switches go. Everybody's guarding everybody. But what are you looking for specifically, and what's your thoughts on the way Gabe is going to handle VanVleet now that he may not shoot 7 of 22 tomorrow night?
I do want to say first that just in my opinion, just pure guessing, I feel like at least one of the two do play. It just feels like it was one of those things where it is 4 games in 5 nights that even though they lost this game, I think it was totally the right move not to play either one of them. PJ Tucker has been through more than enough this season that he's there every single night, playing a ton of minutes. Jimmy just had the ankle and he ended up going 3 extra overtimes. That was totally the right move, but I feel like that was just a cautionary thing to give them the night off that I wouldn't be surprised if probably both of them played tomorrow, but that's just pure guessing. If they don't play, I think the biggest thing for me is don't do some of the stuff we just talked about in this pod. The perimeter play thing is the thing that stands out to me most. The reason they were in that game and they fought back in that Raptors game was because of the driving kicks, was because they were getting rim pressure and they were kind of not being so ball dominant and on ball, because that is not a way you beat this Raptors team. They will swarm you all over the place. We saw late in that game when Jimmy would kind of hold the ball way in front of the 3-point line. Fred VanVleet would come swarm up from the weak side corner to come double him across the court and force him to give that ball up. You have to move that ball against this Raptors team because they will be right in your face on pick and rolls, switches, and everything along those lines. That if you don't have Jimmy and you don't have PJ as that corner release guy, it's just tough to see the way you can beat the things that Toronto can throw at you in a close game late in the fourth. Like, it's just, it is what it is. Like, Gabe Vincent can do certain things, as we said before, the word compliment. He can compliment the things these others do, but when he's the guy that you're asking to kind of beat these switches and beat these lengthy defenders are throwing at you, gets the rim and make plays, Tyler as well included, it's just tough to see an outlet. I think there is a pure thing that just if they shoot the ball at an incredible level and they just get the ball up, they can do it. I think that was the plan tonight. I think that was the plan with that starting lineup. When I said there was no creation, the thing about that starting lineup, it's either going to look absolutely amazing or it's going to look terrible. There's just no in between. You're either going to shoot the ball at an elite level with Max Strus and Duncan on the floor, or there's not going to be enough creation. It's going to get shut down. You're going to score 14 points in the first quarter. So the only way, if you don't have Jimmy, you don't have PJ, you just got to shoot the ball a ton and just kind of pray that goes in.
I love your optimism. So let's hope that PJ and Jimmy both play, because then it's a completely different game. I'm looking at Duncan Robinson tomorrow night. I'm going to close here because we've had a lot of good basketball conversation on this podcast. Thank you to Tony and Brady for bringing that element to the show tonight, because usually when it's Ethan and I, it's narrative. But I'm bringing narrative to end this podcast, y'all, and that's this. Duncan Robinson against Toronto in 19 minutes scored nothing. Duncan Robinson tonight against Boston, I don't know, he probably finished with 25, 26 minutes, but he didn't look good. And if he doesn't look good tomorrow night and they've lost 3 straight and he's quiet in all 3 and Max plays well again, it's timing is everything, man. And February 10th is the deadline. And I just think that is going to be interesting to see how he approaches the games that come forward, the subsequent matchups leading up to February 10th, because it's going to get louder and louder if he doesn't play well. And so that's what I'm going to be watching tomorrow night. But again, Miami loses a tough one, 122-92. So that's never fun. They are still right up atop the Eastern Conference, just not with much room to spare. They're at 32-18. And we'll be back tomorrow night for the post game after the Toronto Raptors. Again, thank you to Tony Schwartz. You can follow him at Tony Schwartz NBA, Brady Hawk at Brady Hawk 305. I am Greg Sylvander. Find me there at Greg Sylvander. And that's it. And let's go Heat, because Ethan never closes podcasts with let's go Heat. So I'm just going to throw the fan on him and say that. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for listening to the Five on the Floor on the 5 Regional Sports Network.